Coming up on Serial at Midnight, we've got an all-access interview with Indicator co-founder Sam Dunn. Howdy guys, welcome back to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath Holland, and in this episode we are talking to the Indicator co-founder Sam Dunn. I say all access because this really does go to some places that a lot of my interviews don't go. We're going to talk about all the things you want to talk about. We're going to talk about where physical media is going, the history of the company, some of the best releases that they've put out, the most prestigious stuff, licensing deals. Hey, we got this. Are we going to get more of this? The risk and the cost of 4K, but we're also going to talk about some things that I don't think you're going to be expecting, such as collector burnout, such as people running out of time, space, money. All that's going to come up in this interview. It was really refreshing. So listen, I'm holding in my hands here 7 of the latest releases from Indicator, and I will I got Patrick here. I've got Snapshot. So 2 Australian movies that are referenced in the interview you're about to watch. We've got 3 Mexican luchador movies. We've got The Batwoman, The Panther Women, Santo versus the Riders of Terror with their original Spanish language audio. That is huge. I can't overstate it enough because the US releases of these movies, by the way, these are all region free. Or region A and B. Some of them are worldwide. The others are A and B. So fear not for those. But the region A previous Blu-ray editions of these movies, the Batwoman and Santo and the Panther Women, did not have the original Spanish language audio. They had a dub track, a new dub track. We're going to talk more about it in the interview, but we're talking about the original Spanish language audio. So huge cause for celebration. Listen, so much more to talk about. I'll cover these more in depth at the end of this interview. So stay tuned, check out the full conversation. And at the end of this interview, we'll come back and talk about these latest releases because I really do want to highlight them. I think there's a lot to talk about here. But first, we got to get to the meat of this conversation, which is this wonderful, open, honest interview with the founder, the co-founder of Indicator, Mr. Sam Dunn. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here because this is, I don't take it for granted. This is a really big deal. I mean, you're the co-founder, right? Co-founder of the, help me out here. What's the difference between Powerhouse and Indicator?
Yeah, we should have thought of this at the start. we started around, I mean, I guess it's just over 8 years ago now. And the company is called Powerhouse Films Limited, even depending on how technical you want to be. And then I think we thought we should have an imprint just in case what we do ends up veering into different territories. So like if we do TV, if we do film, if we do this, that, the other. And in fact, all we've ever done is just use this one label, this one brand or imprint, which we call Indicator. So take your pick, really. I mean, we kind of talk about the Indicator series without wanting to be too kind of highfalutin, whatever. But that's what we talk about. And but yeah, the company is Powerhouse.
If you set it up so you could go in different directions, is there the possibility of more of those sub labels?
There is. I think there have been some things that we've done in recent years. The Michael J. Murphy set, which you may or may not know about, that we did. It's right there. Cool.
Right
Great. Okay. Yeah.
Right here.
That beast of a thing. Yeah. It was potentially going to be something else. Just because of the kind of off the mapness of it.
Yes.
But I think in the end, I think we think of Indicator as being quite a broad church, in the sense that if it's all film of whatever variety, we will kind of put it in that space. So I think we are reserving the potential right to eventually do maybe a TV line. No, I have no hard or fast news about that, but there's kind of undercurrents of thinking always going on about some of that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so like if you had to describe, there's going to be a lot of people in America who, because you guys have kind of ventured out into the US in the last, it's been about 2 years, maybe a year and a half.
Correct.
Something like that. Yeah. How would you describe to someone who may not know, who's just seeing this for the first time, a physical media collector who has that maybe they only shop at, I was going to say Best Buy, but that's not happening anymore.
No.
They only shop at brick and mortar and they're just starting to learn some of what this stuff is. How would you describe what you do, what Indicator does?
That's a very good question. I think we have, I think there are a number of kind of philosophies, if you like, that underpin what we've been doing. I mean, there are a lot of exceptions. So, for instance, on the one hand, we started out with titles like Christine and Body Double, some kind of quite big hitters.
Hmm.
And I think we did that. We started with a 100 picture license that we did with Sony Pictures in the UK, and that was quite a mixed bag. But key amongst all of the titles that we licensed was really the idea of trying to re-platform or give the first home entertainment platform in many, many cases to films that had kind of fallen off the map, but that had sort of disappeared from distribution and circulation. So there's a kind of huge dedication to that idea of not letting things get lost, bringing them back, trying to not just bring them back, but bring them back in kind of great quality presentations and put some context around them. So, in many, many ways, what we do is not dissimilar to what Arrow does and to what Criterion does. But I think where Criterion, again, there's no hard and fast rule about what they do, but they focus very much, I think, on the canon in some ways, like the kind of the great works of
Right.
cinema. I think we kind of go, well, someone else is looking after that. Other people are doing that. What's all the stuff that has got forgotten about?
Hmm.
So as I say, there are exceptions. There are some big titles. We've got Harryhausen. We've got some key Hammer movies. But I think what you could expect if you were to kind of dig into what we do and into our catalogue is some films you may not have ever heard of. Or just recently, we've slightly confounded people's expectations by doing a whole bunch of Jean Rollin films, for instance, these kind of French 70s, I guess you would call them vampire movies or kind of poetic horror movies or
Right.
fantastique or something, slightly uncategorizable, perhaps. Um, so yeah, it really is a mixed bag, but it's mostly
Hmm.
to do with just kind of loving film, full stop, and that encompasses a whole bunch of stuff. So we try not to zigzag around too much, but you've got classic Hollywood here with the noir box sets and the Lubitsch films and so on and so forth. But then you've got obscure 50s and 60s British, which is kind of my thing,
Yeah.
British of the 60s and the 70s. And yeah, more lately, some genre, so some Ozploitation, some French horror. So just kind of, I don't know, just trying to, and Mexican movies from the late 50s and 60s as well, which is really exciting because actually that's not an area that I personally know a lot about. So that's, for
Right.
me, that's like an education. It's really, really great. So a lot, actually, you could expect to be a bit surprised and hopefully go on quite an exciting journey.
Well, you just opened about three doors that I want to explore. So, first of all, um, let's talk about the Mexican movies because I know.
Yeah,
So in the U.S., some of those movies got released through. Well, it doesn't matter, but they got released here.
yeah.
The Santo movies and the Batwoman, and
Panther
those
Women.
releases in the U.S. do not have the original Spanish language audio tracks.
Right.
And it was like it was a secret, like why they don't. And so I had reached out to the person that put them out in the US, and he said, well, they were
Okay.
never offered, they were not an option for me to license. You guys have them on your release. So I have to ask
Hmm.
like, if you could illuminate that at all for me. Were those off the table or were they just right there?
I guess there's some complicated stuff in the background that even I'm not fully party
Okay.
to. We
Okay.
did our deal is with an amazing woman called Viviana uh, Besne Garcia, and who's just or Garcia Besne rather, sorry, and she is a one woman kind of savior of Mexican genre cinema. She's part of that whole filmmaking dynasty that made those movies, and she's been working on restoring all of those films, and we were lucky enough to kind of connect with her, and we shared this kind of mutual excitement about bringing those movies back into circulation. Her new restorations are beautiful, and yeah, they came with the Spanish tracks, so that's great.
It is
Yeah,
great.
go
It's really,
figure.
listen, it's really great because it's kind of a
Yeah,
deal breaker for some of those movies.
yes,
You want to see them. They commission in the US, there were new dubs commissioned by Robert Rodriguez of
yeah,
El Mariachi fame,
yeah.
and they just feel very modern.
Hmm.
And when you're looking at a movie from 1965 or whatever it may be, it kind of breaks the experience to not have the original Spanish language audio tracks. And for a couple of years, it was a mystery. You guys have them. That's the important takeaway from this is that they're
Yeah,
on these releases.
we have more. We're planning a whole bunch of stuff with Viviana
Oh,
to
wonderful.
bring more and more titles through. Yeah,
That's great news.
yeah, yeah. So
How are
I
you?
see you got Santo there. Yeah, that's great.
I do, yeah. So this is
Yeah,
the one of the Santo releases that's
yeah,
come out
yeah.
from you guys. You talked about your fandom, you talked about trying to fill in the cracks, but I mean this is just the Todd Slaughter set. Even the Michael J. Murphy box set is extremely ambitious, but
Yeah,
also for a lot of that's backwards for a lot of fans, kind of an unknown quantity.
very
I would think
much.
it's a bit of a risk. What
Yes.
what thinking goes into something like this, right?
A risk to my psyche and my well-being. Yeah. Do you know what? I think, look, we're not the only company that does this, so I'm not trying to bang the drum too loudly, but I think there are lots of, as it were, low-hanging fruit that we could kind of go after licensing a whole bunch of studio product and bringing that out. But, my background, I worked at the BFI doing this as well for like 8 or 9 years. And I guess there's something in me which there's a kind of preservation. I mean, I wasn't an archivist. I'm not claiming to have this kind of background in film handling and so on, but
Mm,
from a kind of philosophical position, if you like, I kind of hate to see things getting left out in the dark. The metaphor would be the tin sitting in the vault with it's not going through a projector, it's not being seen.
right.
So I think, although what you get ultimately is a whole bunch of different things coming through. Yeah, Mexican cinema here, Todd Slaughter there, Michael J. Murphy, even like weird and wonderful American movies like Little Murders, for instance. But I think the common thread is this is really hard to see. It's great. You should check it out.
Yeah.
That's really it. And I think from time to time, you're right to sort of say that there's risk. There's definitely risk. But I think what's really nice is that over the years, we've built up quite a dedicated band of people who are really up for, checking out what we do.
Mhm.
And I think from time to time, although we couldn't do it all the time, I think that risk would become too great and we would just fall over. But from time to time, something like the Michael J. Murphy feels important, feels like it should be done. Maybe the BFI should do it, but they weren't going to do it, so we did it.
Is that the same thinking behind something like the Ormond family box set? Is that you just want to
Yeah.
see it done?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one because I think it still fits, it still aligns very much with that idea. But that was again, like in the same way that Viviana brought the Mexico thing in and we
Mhm.
just kind of clicked and connected and that happened. This was really about the research, the amazing work that had been done behind the scenes by Jimmy McDonough, who's the great biographer of Andy Milligan and Tammy Wynette and Russ Meyer. And he'd been, researching the Ormond family for 15 years, and he and Nicholas Winding Refn had kind of, forged an alliance, and Nicholas had put all this money behind that restoration work. And again, it was just making connections, and the fact that really that deserved a home video
Mhm.
Blu-ray outcome. And we were like, yeah, this is great. I mean, again, just the idea that I'd never seen those films, which kind of blew me away. And when I did see them, I was just like, wow.
Going a little bit further down that path about risk, you guys have
Yeah.
leaned into 4K in a pretty big way.
Yeah.
Um, I have talked to many people about 4K and the risks inherent therein. I mean, a lot of them have told me that 4Ks generally cost 4 to 5 times more than a
Yeah.
regular Blu-ray. Can you speak a little bit about maybe
Yeah.
some? I don't want you to give me numbers, but it's more of an expense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. You did. I remember watching you did a great podcast with Frank Tarzi over at Kino like a couple of years ago, and I
Yeah.
think he touched on all of this stuff, and I think those numbers, they're kind of there or thereabouts still true.
When I
Those
talked to him
multiple.
the last time, he said they're going up.
Well, okay, yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, obviously, it depends who you're working with. Any
Right.
deal has like an XY axis. If you can do volume, you can maybe get the net. You can cut some of the costs here, or if you can give a bit more time. There are different ways of skinning a negotiation, if you
Hmm.
if you like. So, but it's expensive. Yeah, I mean, with the Roland films, you just held a couple up. We've got something like 20 under license, and we've had them under license for a number of years. And we actually started out with a really ambitious idea of doing all the 4K restoration work within a 2-year period, getting everything ready and coming out with a box, this incredible, beautiful box that would have cost a hell of a lot, right?
A lot. Yeah.
And we got like 5 or 6 restorations in, and we went, oh my God, this is hurting. It's
Hmm.
just expensive, and there's a way of making it work, but the way not to make it work is just to kind of pile up the costs and not get any return on your investment. So,
Hmm.
so we kind of came up with a different strategy out of necessity. But I think it's a strategy that works very well. I mean, there would have been a lot of people who wouldn't have been able to afford the price we would have had to put on the box. And also, like I say, from a realistic point of view, you have to, work at a certain pace, make sure that you've got a bit of investment here, so you need some return. You need to get it into the market. It needs to start, paying for itself and start helping to pay for the next ones. But sure, I mean, if we were doing everything at 2K, I mean, we've always scanned at 4K, which is great because if we ever decide to go back and do any extra work on any of the titles we've done, at least the scan piece is done. But frankly, that's not when the most cost is really.
Yeah.
Uh, but again, that's a slightly sort of preservation way of thinking because at least for the time being, 4K is pretty much. I mean, obviously you could go 8, you could go 6, you could go 8, but 4K is pretty good. You're kind of getting to like film resolution. But yeah, so far so good. I mean, in terms of yes, it costs a lot more. Hopefully, in due course, that will start to kind of normalize, if you like, in the same way that it did with Blu-ray and
Right.
DVD. I think for me, I don't know if it's too early to sort of even think about this, but we're set for every 9 UHDs of the Rolands that we're selling in the States, we'll sell 1 Blu-ray.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not quite that high in the UK, but it's still skewing hugely. It's like 80/20 instead of 90/10 or whatever. So it's still huge. It's the skew to UHD is huge.
That's
So
incredible.
for me, I mean, the question on my lips is really, do we need Blu-ray on the titles that we do UHD? I mean, I'm not trying to like scare people into going, oh my God. But I think if you are the kind of person who enjoys these movies and they've been done to this standard and they look incredible. I mean, I don't mean to blow our trumpet, but anybody's 4K discs, if you look at some of
Blow
the
it.
recent BFIs or Arrow or whatever,
Yeah.
it's a totally different experience. Um, so that's I really wonder about whether there'll come a time when if we announce a title that's on UHD, you just say, and that's it. We're not going to do the Blu-ray.
That'd
I'm
be
not
an
saying that's
interesting.
going to happen now, but
Yeah, yeah.
soon.
That'd be an interesting experiment to see who would follow. I mean, the numbers you saying nine, would you say 9 4Ks
Yeah,
to every one Blu-ray in the US?
correct. Yeah, yeah.
That's
It's huge,
really
right?
surprising.
I mean,
Yeah, it's really huge.
it's absolutely huge. So at the moment, we actually really feel that we're possibly manufacturing too many Blu-rays on the titles that we're releasing in the States. That we should, reduce the limited number. But you don't know these things until you
Yeah.
get the evidence, you get the information, and the
Right.
results.
What was the decision to expand into the United States in the first place?
Quite a lot of our customer base comes from the US, that we could gather that information through our direct to customer site. We have a
Mhm.
partnership with a great company called Limewood Media, who does all of our direct to customer shipments, and they host our website and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it felt like a natural next step. I mean, I think the titles that we went out with, which were frankly some rather obscure British titles, which is quite a big ask of a US company, but there were certain factors and reasons why those are the titles that we had to lead with.
Mhm.
But yeah, we just felt that there was a market, that there was an opportunity, and the name of the game is getting as many people to see these kind of crazy obscure movies as possible. So that
Right.
felt like
Can you talk a little bit about region coding? Because I know there are a
Yeah.
lot of US fans who go to the website, the UK website, and they see the things that they want. Oh, yeah, the Columbia Noir sets. And then you just
Yeah.
announced there's a Whistler set coming, which is
Yeah.
fantastic because those movies are a lot of fun.
Indeed.
A lot of those sets have been region locked. Some of the Hammer stuff was region locked as well. Now, I know that this comes from the request of the studio. It's not even the
Yeah.
request, the studio. This is a studio issue. Um, can you talk a little bit about region coding, why it's still around, and why some of the releases that you guys put out are region locked?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things to say there. When we did our first deal with Sony, which as I mentioned earlier, was a good 100 plus titles, somehow we managed to get written into the contract that they didn't have to be region locked. So actually, our first few years of releasing, which was predominantly Sony titles, we picked up a few Universals and Foxes, maybe in year 3 or 4, were region free. And that's possibly why we were seeing a relatively big take up from US customers.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we've been back and done a couple more agreements with Sony, and they've hard locked region coding into it. Uh, what is it? What is it? And why is it? I think it's a nonsense. I mean, so I think it's always been a nonsense, but I think it's a legacy from a time, not exactly a pre-internet era, but certainly the dawning days of, I don't know if you remember, I don't know, some of those early great independent sites that sold DVDs and stuff. I mean, I was buying lots from the States when I was, 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was someone who, obviously got myself a region free player. So I got around it that way. And I know that a lot of people do that same in the States.
Yeah.
But with the coming of DVD, I think a lot of studios panicked about, mitigating any risk associated with territory invasion and territory exploitation. They just wanted to kind of make sure that they ring fence the key territories, like Europe. And I suppose that just comes, I don't really know. It doesn't make any
I mean,
sense
a
to me.
more cynical explanation would also be that they want to sell it to different regions. They want to sell those
Correct.
movies to every region that they
Yeah, they're
can,
trying
which
to
makes
protect
good
each
business
individual
sense.
market.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, it does. I suppose it does. But on the other
Doesn't mean
hand,
we like it, but I know, like,
but if in the aggregate they sell the same number of units, it's what's the difference, right?
right.
If
Yeah.
it's a Sony, and actually Sony editions tend to, I think, or at least always historically tended to be region free anyway. So it only seemed like a logical extension of their own practice to allow us to do it region free. But anyway, we've had many, many long and fruitless debates with Sony about this. So this is one of the reasons why it's great to work with. It's always, I mean, it's great to work with Sony. It's great to work with the studios in general. It is a frustration, the region locking thing. And I think it's very telling, obviously, that there's no region locking on UHD. I think someone somewhere has woken up and gone, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. So the fact that it still is retrospectively imposed on Blu-ray is a little bit confusing, given that
Yeah.
that's the case.
There have been a few locked Ultra HDs too, which is very
Have they
frustrating.
really? Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know. Oh, that's interesting.
But
Right.
what it's happened a
Oh,
few times, and a few of them they've said people have said it was a mistake, and I'm like, was it though? Was it though? Was it
yeah,
really a mistake?
interesting.
I
Wow.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
As someone who's deeply invested in the success, the further growth
Yes.
of physical media as a format, I'm
Yeah.
curious where you think all this is going. Like, how is it? If you could just kind of look at the last, just from your seat at Powerhouse slash Indicator over the last, you said about 8 years or so.
Yeah.
How has it kind of evolved, and where do you think it's going? Is obviously we're seeing less brick and mortar support, but has the sort of the direct to consumer model taken up some of that space?
Yeah. Oh, some big questions. Lots to
So
say
this is a
there.
small question.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting, this question, when's it all going to finally end, this physical media thing? I feel like people have been posing this question every year for the last 20
They have.
plus years. And,
Yeah.
I feel like I started at a company called Tartan Video. That was when I got my break. And that was great working there. It was an independent company run by quite a maverick guy, a guy called Hamish McAlpine. And he brought lots of like the key well, he coined this phrase Asia Extreme, and he brought lots of the key Japanese, Korean, so on movies like Ringu and Audition and so on.
Mhm.
And the reason why I just mention all of that is because even then, and that's, where are we, 24, 25 years ago, there were people saying, yeah, give it 5 years, you know.
Yeah.
And when I joined the BFI, frankly, I was joined to sort of actually wind down that department and make way for, digital and all kinds of. Thankfully, it's still there and still thriving and still doing great stuff. But there is, yeah. I don't know why. I feel like people almost will it to be over. Like, I think for some people, it's just not interesting. All these films on home video, they want to go and see them at the cinema. It's sexier to go to festivals, but I think that there's just a core. Thank goodness for them. I mean, I'm one of them as well. I've got all this, got all this stuff myself. I just think it's really important. I just think it's really, and I think that there are enough people out there, however many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, who still feel the same. I think that the challenges for anyone who is invested in the idea of buying this stuff is just the sheer amount of it that's coming out. I mean, there and by so many extraordinary and brilliant labels. Anyone from Mondo Macabro, Vinegar Syndrome, or to Radiance in the UK, or and the idea of someone like Radiance only being about 2 years old now is crazy as well. Because if you'd have asked someone 10 years ago, they'd have said it'd been all over. And yet, here's Fran doing Radiance and surprising us with his choices as well. It's great. I don't know if I've answered all of your questions there. I think there was quite a lot.
Well, there was. I just kind of wanted your read on where you think this is going. You think
well,
it's
where's
going to
it
stick
going?
around?
Right. That's the thing I didn't really. I mean, I don't. Obviously, the idea that something could go on forever is stupid, and very unlikely. Whether you're
Well, let
talking
me
about
ask you this: do you
race
see any end to the? I talked to Bill Lustig from Blue Underground, okay, and he said there's going to come a time when there aren't any more movies to license.
Oh, that's
Is
that's
that
an
like
interesting
where?
one.
How far away is that? Do you think?
I don't. I mean, I suppose, if you were going to do like a logical proposition or something, you would say that would eventually be the case. But man, there's so much that isn't out there.
And they
There's
keep
so
making
much
new
that isn't
movies
out.
too.
And they keep making new movies, yeah. But also, when you get a new format, I guess there's always the opportunity to kind of revisit, not
Mhm.
to kind of just endlessly recycle, because that's tiresome. And,
Right.
we haven't all got endless shelf space and deep enough pockets. But I mean, I can think of a lot of movies that I would love to do that haven't ever been done.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's basically logically correct, but I think that there's, this is the thing. I look around at all of these labels. I've already mentioned many of them, and I'm just, every announcement, I'm like, wow, wow, they've gone down that rabbit hole, or they've gone down that, and it just blows my mind, because that's what I want from my physical media
Right.
collection. I want
Well,
I want to be surprised. I want to be shown something I'd never seen.
to your point, we'll bring up Fran again because I interviewed
Yeah,
Fran right before Radiance launched, and he was saying that I just want to put out movies that I love, maybe movies
yeah,
people haven't heard of, and I was like, well, interesting. And then lo and behold, he did, and he's put out some stuff that I have never heard of,
right.
and
Yeah,
and you guys are doing that too because there's going to be a lot of people who are like, who's this Michael J. Murphy guy? I don't know what this
yes,
is. Or the Ormond family. Like, who are these guys?
right.
So you guys are, to your credit, you guys are doing that too. While you're
Yes,
also, I shout out to those Columbia Noir sets. Shout
yeah,
out to the Hammer sets. The what? Where is it? The Five Tall Tales set. You guys, so Criterion got a lot of press when they put out these Bud Vedek or Randolph Scott westerns on 4K, but you guys put
yeah.
this out years ago in an
We
incredible
did.
box set.
Yeah.
Props where they're due. I mean, this was
Thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah, great
Good
films.
cinema preservation there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So
Um,
where's it going? I mean, I guess if I can try and put the answer to that in a nutshell, I would say I think it's a long way off. I think
mhm,
that the biggest challenges are shelf space, right?
yeah,
I'm sure we're all being tested and trying to, build new shelves in weird
right.
corners in our, you know, wherever the hell we store all this stuff. And money as well. I mean, if I try to think what it's like if you're a hardcore collector who really has a deep passion, because you need to be earning a lot of money, a lot of money to pay for,
Yeah.
everything that's coming out of all of these spaces every month. I mean, I think some hard decisions have to be taken, monthly by a lot of collectors, which is tough and a shame. But I think those, and where I see the potential for drop off is literally some people going, I can't do this anymore. I think it's less about the practice of putting discs out and more about the collector's end. I feel like the dedication is from the collectors, of which I am one. And I feel like the biggest risk at the moment is just that there's just so much stuff, and that the collectors might just kind of like max out at some point and go, oh, I can't do it.
So following up on that, if that's for sure a thing that's happening. There is a collector burnout happening right now because
Yeah,
we are running out of space, time, and
yeah,
money. But
yeah.
do you see a new audience coming in? Do you see them coming in now or over the next few years discovering this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the evidence that I could point to is largely anecdotal in terms of looking at what's happening
Mhm.
with us. But we get a lot of communications from people who are definitely younger, mostly men,
Yeah.
but not exclusively. But I think that they are people who are just taking great delight in discovering these films for the first time. That because they're relatively deep catalog, but also because they're from an era that predates them hugely, by decades. I mean, clearly, the majority is people for whom they've seen a lot of this stuff first time round, or they remember it, or they have a kind of nostalgia about what used to be on TV, and TV's changed massively. You don't get any of this stuff.
Hmm.
That's another key component, I think. I mean, my love for cinema came through watching some of the great series and seasons that were on the BBC, in the late 70s, early 80s, late 80s as well, where they really had this extraordinary approach to programming and curating, which they just don't have anymore. And in a way, that's migrated into this space that Fran and
Hmm.
Powerhouse and all the other guys, Mondo Macabro, that's what they're essentially curators.
Well, listen, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I do want to talk a little bit about what's happening right now because we should talk
Yeah,
about some of the latest releases. We talked about the Whistler set that's coming out, which by the way, I'm really excited about that. Thank you
right.
for picking that up. Um, Australian cinema, right? There's some
Yeah,
Australian releases that are coming out.
correct. Yeah.
Mexican films, we've got more of those the things that you were talking about. What else? What else should we hit? What else can you tell us that might get people excited?
Yeah, I don't
I'm
think I
not looking
can.
for a scoop or
Yeah,
anything.
no, I don't think I can give you anything hard and fast. But we just we've mentioned it elsewhere with that we've done another deal with Sony. We've got 55 or so pictures, and that's a real mixed bag. So there's a bit of classic Hollywood. There's a Rita Hayworth here, and
Hmm.
you know there's some British, kind of interesting British titles in the mix there as well, of various eras, 50s, 60s. Um, But we've got like Richard Pryor movies in the mix coming down the line, which is going to be exciting. Well, it is exciting. We've been trying to get those for a little while. We've got more. I just spoke about the Mexican. We've got some more crazy, crazy Mexican movies coming, which I'm really excited about. Obviously, we've got a lot more in the way of Roland. We've got a few non-Roland Euro sort of cinema stuff from the 70s, genre things. We just got so much.
Do you have
Lots of.
anything coming that's going to surprise people, like these Ormond family sets or the Michael J. Murphy sets? Any things totally out of left field?
That is a good question.
Maybe. Just say maybe. Maybe. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have surprises. Whether they're of that kind of magnitude is another matter, really. I think possibly Michael J. Murphy may be a one-off
Yeah.
in the sense of it being so unknown and so huge and so ambitious. Because it kind of,
Hmm.
it was tough putting that together. That was quite a beast, because that was about 20 restorations from quite challenging elements. So, but yeah, I mean, one thing's for sure, the rest of the year is definitely packed with the usual eclectic, and largely previously undistributed stuff outside of Roland, which has obviously done a few VHS and DVD editions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and lots coming. We're not I mean, we're scheduled through till something like 2026, so we got a lot of great stuff.
Oh, Universal Noir. We should talk about the Universal Noir as
Yes,
well.
yeah, 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 we have more.
That's
We have more coming down
more.
the line from
Okay.
Universal. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've also got a bunch of irons in fires with more deals under discussion.
People
But
are going
that's
to ask me why I didn't ask you this. So let me ask you this. Obviously, you've probably
uh,
approached Warner Brothers, I'm assuming, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, God, we'd love to do some of the Warner stuff. But
Everybody
I
would.
mean, yeah, of course. But I'm not even talking about the obvious kind of big things. Like there are things that would just be, it would just be so amazing to see some kind of generally late 60s, early 70s kind of peculiar
Mhm.
British and American um titles. Yeah, we'd love to get our hands on some big ones as well. But yeah, I mean, there are obviously some exceptions. Criterion have an ongoing relationship. Arrow does a number of the Warners, but the general response is we don't do that.
Yeah.
So that may change. I think it's a very interesting time with the studios. There's lots of change, consolidation, lots of putting their home entertainment release out of house, kind of changing the setup, not having it internal anymore.
Yeah.
So, and obviously they're hugely focused on their digital strategies, and I think they're frankly bewildered by why we keep coming and knocking on the door and saying we'd love to do this. Because to me it makes. I say this not just because it's what we do, but the idea that you would come and say, hey, these really obscure movies that you've never ever put out on DVD or VHS, we'd love to do them. We'd love to restore them. We'd love to give you a royalty. We'd love to be the bank on the restoration. I'm still amazed that they don't just go, yeah, sure, great. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you guys continue to carve out really interesting territory with classics and obscurities and crowd pleasers. And I just want to thank you for what you've done to get these movies in front of people, what you continue to do, and for your time here today. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. That's great. I appreciate the kind words. Thanks. Great to meet you.
It's hard to watch this interview or listen to this interview and not get fired up about movies, right? Now, I know this is collector focused. I mean, physical media by its very nature is collector focused, but what I get from Indicator is a love of the movie first, and I feel like the packaging and the special features and the presentation all supports the movie. And listen, I can't say that about everybody, about every company out there. I'm not even thinking of anybody specifically. There's no company that I'm necessarily thinking of or pointing a finger, but I do sometimes feel like collectible nature, like a collectible aspect, comes before the movie. That's not what Indicator does. Indicator is clearly built around a love of cinema, and then everything on those discs, from the packaging to the special features, supports that, right? So I want to talk about these new releases. Now, this is going to be going out to both the video and the audio podcast feed. If you're listening to the audio version, maybe hop over to the video version on YouTube, but there's a link to it in the description of this episode. Hop over so you can see what I'm talking about, because I think that seeing is believing. And I'm not going to get super in the weeds on these. I'm not going to start reading the entire list of special features. I am going to say they're loaded. They are absolutely loaded with special features. Something that Indicator has cracked, and I like this, is that they have made their releases smaller over the last few months. I have the first Santo release. This is the Inter Santo box, and it's a Blu-ray case and then a booklet. Well, it's not a booklet, it's a book. We're talking about like 80-page perfect bound books. So the new releases do the exact same thing, but they've managed to make them smaller. They have substituted the Blu-ray case for a cardboard. Instead of plastic, we have cardboard wrapping around the plastic tray, and it just makes things a little bit more shelf friendly. And I think that's important because we are all dealing with a lack of space and a lack of time and a lack of money, as talked about in the interview. These 4Ks are they're new 4Ks. Listen, Patrick has 3 cuts on the movie. There's the Australian movie about the guy that's basically he's committing crimes with his mind. He's in a hospital bed, basically in a coma, but his mind is committing all these different atrocities. We got 3 versions of the film. We got the original Australian theatrical cut, the shortened redubbed US theatrical cut, and the Italian language version featuring an alternate score by prog rock legends Goblin, with English subtitles. I mean, that is incredible. So here, I'm holding this up for the people that are, again, see, this is what you're missing if you're listening to the audio feed. Though I do love you for checking out the audio feed here. Snapshot is another one. This is about a woman that takes a photograph and things go things go pretty sour after that. I've talked about this before. We've got lots and lots of things here too. I mean, the extras, they just go on and on and on. And again, we've got the film and a really dense book that I can't show it on camera because it's got a lot of stuff that's not YouTube safe. Let's talk about these Rene Cardona Mexican films, The Batwoman, The Panther Women, and Santo versus the Riders of Terror. These are limited to 8,000 copies, and these are Blu-ray. They're restored from there. I think all three of these are restored in 4K, I believe. Now they're not on The Panther Women is a 2K restoration, and The Batwoman is a 4K restoration. But what I love about these, first of all, these are going to look better than they've ever looked before, and they're going to sound better than we've had in a long time because we've got that soundtrack back, that original Spanish language soundtrack back. Again, beautifully put together, 80-page books in each of these filled with photos. These movies hit me in such a fun place. And again, there were reviews for these at CerealAtMidnite.com. I think I've reviewed most of, if not all three. I know I've reviewed the Santo. I was working my way through the Santo series. Santo and the Riders of Terror is basically just Santo traveling. It's just Santo in the Old West. There's no real logic for the Santo movies as far as like an interconnecting mythology, but it's luchador style, and then some sort of an adventure, usually with a supernatural twist. Santo's the Riders of Terror has got lepers in it. The Panther Women, I mean, it's a luchador women's wrestling outfit, basically fighting evil, you know? And then the Batwoman is straight up exploiting the 1966 Adam West Batman film. Her costume is a bikini. It's a bikini with, she's got bat ears on her head, and that's it. 1968, wonderful, wonderful stuff. You got the movie, you've got the 80-page book, and then tons and tons and tons of new special features. Any version of these movies that may have come out before, and again, I've got them, you know, I've got them, I've reviewed them, I've talked about them. Any previous version of these movies doesn't have anywhere close to the special features here. So Indicator is really bringing the quality when it comes to the bonuses here. And listen, we're still not done, guys. We've got two more releases here. We've got Christopher Lee in Jenna, and we've got Impossible Object, directed by John Frankenheimer. If you don't know the name Impossible Object, the alternate title was Story of a Love Story. And again, we've got a huge booklet here, a really dense booklet that I cannot flip through here on camera. But it's loaded up with special features, high prestige release. They're putting the movie first, and that's the kind of quality that I just really appreciate that Indicator is bringing to all this stuff. And then Christopher Lee in Jenna. This is another one that I think is a 1998 film that has really fallen off the radar, at least in the United States. I can't speak for England, but I suspect the fact that it's getting attention from Indicator means that they're trying to shine a spotlight on it. So there is so much stuff to celebrate here. And I feel very grateful to Sam for being so forthright and open and honest and transparent with his answers. And I feel really grateful to know that it seems as if the stuff that we love, the preservation of movies, the saving of movies, the restoration of movies, and then the release of movies in the best format possible with the full record of that movie, I feel like it's good for me to know that we're going to be okay for a long time to come. You know, there's been a lot of gloom and doom takes over the last few years, including from people that I've interviewed here, and you've seen them probably, so you know what we're talking about. It's good to get a more optimistic take from somebody that's deeply invested in this stuff. So it makes me feel good about it, and it makes me want to cherish my collection a little bit more, keep expanding, keep adding to it. Links are going to be in the description of this episode. Again, if you're checking out the audio version, hop over, check out the video version. If you're only watching the video version, did you know a lot of these episodes end up on the Serial at Midnight podcast feed? And you can get that podcast wherever you get your podcast, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, pretty much everywhere. So thank you guys. Thanks again to Sam Dunn. This is just a real pleasure for me. I'm so happy to have been at the forefront of this conversation, being able to make it happen and bring it to you. I love doing this. I love talking about releases, but more importantly, I love talking about how this stuff happens and being able to focus on some of the titles that we get to talk about. All right, guys, I appreciate you. Subscribe, thumbs up, Patreon support if you want to. These are ad supported, right? You just saw a whole interview with someone at a label, at a company then without any sponsorship. Now, there were probably ads in this video or this episode, but I take no sponsorships. So it's you and me. We support what we care about directly now. So if you enjoyed what you see and you want to support Cereal at Midnight, that's one way you can do is Patreon. YouTube memberships is another way, $5 a month. You get exclusive, you get early access. In fact, this very video probably had early access for YouTube members and for Patreon. And usually an exclusive video, I try to do once a week. Sometimes it's a little bit more sporadic than that, but there's always something new going on for people that support Cereal at Midnight at a higher level. But the least you can do, guys, the least you can do is subscribe so that more people find this content, because subscribing gets those numbers up, makes more interviews like this possible. So what you support directly goes into what we get to talk about here. Makes sense, right? Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Take care. Till next time, I will catch you later.